For years, the royal family has kept silent about the one name that still echoes through every corridor of Buckingham Palace, Diana. But now that silence has been broken. Prince Edward, known as the most reserved of the Queen's children, has finally spoken out, and what he said changes everything. It wasn't a polished royal statement. It wasn't scripted or filtered through palace advisors. It was raw, personal, and for many, deeply uncomfortable. In his words, there was both pain and reflection, and perhaps a hint of truth the monarchy has tried to bury for decades. Was Diana misunderstood? Or was the royal family finally ready to confront the past that has haunted them for years? The moment Prince Edward opened up, every British network turned their attention back to a story many thought had ended with a funeral in 1997. But as he revisited those memories, his tone, his body language, even his pauses, all suggested there was far more behind Diana's story than the public ever knew. Before we dive deeper, I want to ask you, do you believe the royal family ever truly forgave Diana? Or did her shadow remain a silent force shaping every decision that came after? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below, because what you're about to hear next might completely change the way you see both Diana and the royal family that has survived her. Let's begin. Prince Edward had always been the quiet one in the royal family, the observer who never sought the spotlight. He was loyal, disciplined, and careful to avoid the mistakes that had brought scandals to others. For decades, he had stayed in the background, a figure of composure and restraint. So when he finally decided to speak about Princess Diana, the world was taken aback. His words revealed an insider's view of the late princess, one that was conflicted and deeply human. Edward began by revisiting the early years of Diana's life within the royal circle. He spoke of how the family had initially welcomed her with warmth and hope. She brought light and freshness into rooms that had long been ruled by tradition. And that was exactly where her troubles began. Stay tuned because the story is about to get wild. You see, beyond all the smiles and photo opportunities, Diana never suspected that tension was quietly growing. According to Edward, Diana's charm drew more attention than the crown itself. And that didn't sit well with the institution built on hierarchy. The monarchy thrived on order, and Diana's spontaneous, emotional nature disrupted it. Here's where things start to get strange. Edward explained that Diana's struggles were not simply a result of her unhappy marriage or media intrusion, as many had long believed. Instead, it was more systemic. Within palace walls, Diana represented change, and change for the monarchy was a threat. Her ability to connect directly with people, to make them feel seen and understood, bypassed the carefully controlled image the family had maintained for centuries. That was where the real conflict began. It wasn't just about love or loyalty, it was about power and control. According to Edward, Diana's growing independence made her a subject of both admiration and trouble within the royal household. As she grew from a shy young woman into a global figure of compassion, her influence extended far beyond what the palace had anticipated. Edward described how some within the royal system viewed her as unpredictable, too open, too emotional, too willing to challenge the rules. She had started to use her platform for causes that didn't always align with the monarchy's public image. Behind the scenes, this caused divisions among senior royals and advisors who saw her as a risk rather than an asset. And that's when everything changed. Edward admitted that Diana's relationship with the media became the turning point. What began as innocent fascination turned into a relentless storm. The public loved her. The press couldn't get enough of her story. Inside the palace, this created a sense of loss of control. The royal institution, which had always managed its image carefully, was suddenly competing with Diana for the public's loyalty. Edward reflected that this imbalance deepened her isolation, as she found herself caught between her public role and private pain. He added that the palace's response, coldness and detachment, may have contributed to her downfall as much as the media pressure itself. But if you think that's unbelievable, wait till you hear this. Edward's revelations suggested that the monarchy, for all its discipline and protocol, was unprepared for someone like Diana. She represented a modern world that demanded transparency and emotional connection. While the institution still operated on secrecy and restraint, he revealed that even after her separation from Prince Charles, Diana remained a sensitive subject in royal circles. There was an unspoken rule to keep her memory distant, to avoid reopening old wounds. Yet, Edward confessed that the silence around her story only made her legacy grow stronger. In trying to contain her, the monarchy had amplified her even more. It didn't make sense until they looked closer. Edward's decision to speak after all these years seemed less like rebellion and more like reckoning. He had spent decades watching the royal family manage scandal after scandal, and perhaps Diana's story stayed with him as the one that changed everything. By sharing his own side, he wasn't attacking the monarchy. He was acknowledging its flaws, an admission that the system had failed Diana, not just as a person, but as a symbol of humanity in an institution built on perfection. He wanted to show that her story wasn't only about tragedy, but it was also about awakening. Edward's words revealed the emotional cost of silence within the royal family. For years, that silence had been mistaken for dignity, but he made it clear that it often served as a shield for guilt and regret. His confession challenged the old motto of never complain, never explain. It showed that keeping quiet had not protected the family. It had only deepened misunderstandings. By breaking his silence, Edward seemed to be seeking closure, both for himself and perhaps for the monarchy. As his revelation spread, many wondered why he chose this moment. Some believed it was guilt, others saw it as loyalty to Diana's memory, and some thought it was simply time for truth. To find the answer, we need to go back to where it all started, the tragic moment of Diana's death. Keep watching, because what we are about to reveal will blow your mind. Tragic death of Princess Diana. When the news of Princess Diana's death broke on that quiet Sunday morning in August 1997, it felt as though the world had stopped breathing. The crash in Paris that claimed her life was not just another royal tragedy. It was the breaking point of a relationship between the monarchy and the people that had been fragile for years. Across continents, millions gathered, cried, and laid flowers, as if the loss was deeply personal. Yet within the walls of Balmoral Castle, the royal family's silence echoed louder than any public outcry. At first, it seemed normal until it wasn't. The Queen and her family had retreated into privacy, shielding the young princes, William and Harry, from the chaos outside, but the absence of a public statement or visible sorrow from the monarchy quickly became a national wound. For 5 days, the flag above Buckingham Palace remained still, not flown at half-mast, not moved by the tide of grief sweeping through London. Newspapers carried headlines filled with outrage, and broadcasters questioned what had become of the royal family's humanity. For Prince Edward, those days were painfully strange. He was the youngest of the Queen's children, often unnoticed in public debates. Yet he felt the weight of both loss and duty. He had known Diana not only as a sister-in-law, but as a presence that challenged everything the royal family stood for. Her warmth, her willingness to break protocol, and her ability to connect with ordinary people made her both beloved and controversial within the palace. When she died, Edward found himself caught between genuine grief and the rigid expectations of royal composure. But what happened next shocked everyone. The public's fury reached a breaking point. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace, shouting, crying, demanding that the Queen return to London and share in the mourning. People began leaving notes pinned to the palace gates, messages that were as much accusations as condolences. One read that Diana had given her heart to the people, and now the people wanted the royals to show they had hearts. 2. When the Queen finally addressed the nation, standing in black before the cameras, it was a moment of reluctant reckoning. The monarchy had always been built on distance, but Diana's death forced it into the modern age, an age where silence was seen as indifference and tradition as coldness. In those days, the institution nearly cracked under the pressure of public emotion. Tony Blair, then Prime Minister, called her the people's princess, a phrase that softened the storm. But it also drew a clear line between Diana's empathy and the monarchy's stiffness. Edward watched all this unfold from the background. Unlike Charles, he was not the subject of gossip or scandal. Unlike William and Harry, he had no public role in the mourning process. Yet, his absence was noted. People wanted to see the family united in grief, but Edward stayed silent. It wasn't that he didn't care. It was that he didn't know how to act in a world where emotion had suddenly become the standard for royalty. His restraint was misread as coldness, though those close to him would later say it came from confusion and pain. But there's something most people don't know about this. Keep watching because it will surprise you. In the weeks after the funeral, Edward privately began questioning how the palace handled Diana's memory. Inside the royal circle, some believed that the family's delayed response had nearly caused irreversible damage to the institution. Reports later revealed that even senior courtiers admitted they had underestimated the public's attachment to her. Diana's global reach was massive. Her funeral drew an estimated 2 billion viewers worldwide, one of the largest televised events in history. To the people, her death was not just a loss, but a betrayal of love and hope. For Edward, that betrayal struck closer to home than many realized. He had admired Diana's authenticity, even when it clashed with the family's preference for restraint. Her openness had made her vulnerable, but also immortal in the eyes of the public. After her death, Edward reportedly spent time reflecting on how her life and the monarchy's reaction to it symbolized a deeper crisis. Behind closed doors, discussions about modernization began. Advisors talked about changing the monarchy's image, about showing empathy, about being more like Diana. It sounded almost ironic. The woman once seen as too emotional and too independent was now being held up as a model for saving the monarchy. Edward, usually the quiet one, found himself supporting small changes, more visibility, more sincerity, and a willingness to acknowledge the world beyond royal walls. It was subtle, but it marked the beginning of his internal shift, one that would later lead him to speak publicly about the family's mistakes. As the years passed, the pain of that summer in 1997 lingered. William and Harry grew into adulthood under the shadow of their mother's legacy. The Queen, though still admired, carried the memory of that public backlash for the rest of her reign. The institution had learned its lesson, but not without scars. The monarchy began opening its doors slightly, attending more charity events, engaging with the media more directly, and presenting a softer, more human face. Yet, those gestures could never fully erase the silence that followed Diana's death. And that's when everything changed. When Edward finally spoke, he described the days following Diana's death as a time of shame and conflict, not for what was done, but for what wasn't. The failure to show emotion, the hesitation to lead with empathy had haunted him. His admission revealed how deeply the tragedy had shaken not only the nation, but the royal conscience itself. The irony of it all was that Diana's death, a moment of immense loss, had become the spark that forced the monarchy to evolve. It brought the crown closer to the people and redefined what leadership meant in an age where emotions mattered as much as symbols. Yet, even with those changes, the family's image never fully recovered to what it once was. The tragedy had made them human, but at a cost that could never be undone. As the chapter closed on that painful era, one truth remained. Diana's death had changed the monarchy forever. The facade of perfection had cracked, and the world had seen what lay beneath. A family bound by duty, but fractured by emotion. Are you wondering how much Diana's death changed the royal family? Keep watching for answers. Royal family after Diana's death. In the days and months that followed Diana's death, the way of life of the royal family began to change. Edward admits that there was understanding behind closed doors that something went wrong. Royals started asking what they could have done differently and how they could connect better with the people who had once adored them. The death of the Princess of Wales became the mirror that showed the monarchy its cracks. The world had changed and the royal family could no longer hide behind the curtain of tradition. The royal family returned to their duties, dressed in black, bowed heads and polite smiles. But the people were not fooled. They wanted warmth, not formality. They wanted to see that the royals felt what they felt. The Queen suddenly became the focus of public anger. Newspapers continued to ask why she had not spoken sooner. Prince Charles also was not spared. His relationship with Diana had been strained for years, and after her death, public judgment was harsh. He was seen as the man who broke her heart. But what most people didn't know about this is that behind his public guilt, Charles began to change. He started showing a softer side, speaking about family, charity, and the environment in ways he never had before. It was as if Diana's loss had opened a door inside him that had long been locked. But that wasn't all. Camilla Parker Bowles, the woman once blamed for Diana's unhappiness, found herself in a difficult position. She stayed away from the public eye for years, allowing time to heal the wounds. Slowly she re-entered royal life, first in private, then beside Charles. The people resisted her at first, but over time they saw something different. She had become the presence who brought calm to a man once trapped in conflict. Her quiet patience became one of the unexpected results of the tragedy. What had seemed unforgivable began to be understood, though never forgotten. The younger royals, William and Harry, were no longer just princes in line for the throne. They became the faces of a new kind of royalty. The world had seen them walk behind their mother's coffin as children, their face pale and hearts broken. That image stayed with everyone. As they grew older, they carried Diana's memory like a torch. They spoke of kindness, openness, and connection. They hugged people at events. They talked about mental health and loss. For the first time, the royal family seemed to speak a language that people could understand. Prince William, in particular, began to prepare for a different kind of monarchy. He understood that leadership was no longer about distance, but about presence. He married Catherine Middleton, a woman from outside the aristocracy, and together they showed a version of royal life that felt normal. They raised their children in a mix of tradition and warmth, with laughter in public and no fear of being seen as imperfect. Diana's influence ran through every part of their lives. Prince Harry, on the other hand, took a different path. His bond with his mother's memory was strong, but it also carried pain. He struggled with the pressure of royal life and the constant reminder of his loss. If you think that was all Harry faced, then what you are about to see will break your heart. When he married Meghan Markle, the same walls that once trapped Diana seemed to rise again. The media scrutiny, the criticism, the palace tension, it all felt too familiar. And so he chose to step away. His decision to leave the royal family with Meghan was not just rebellion, it was a reflection of everything Diana had once fought for. You know, the freedom to live and love without fear. But what happened next shocked everyone. As the younger royals moved forward, the older generation tried to find their footing. Princess Anne, ever practical and hardworking, remained the family's anchor. She quietly carried out hundreds of engagements each year, showing a no-nonsense loyalty to duty. Prince Edward and Sophie also grew closer to the public. Yet, it was Prince Andrew who brought new turmoil to the royal fold. Remember the story of his friendship with the financier Jeffrey Epstein? It became one of the darkest chapters in royal history. The scandal stained his reputation and cast a shadow over the entire family. In the eyes of many, it undid some of the progress the monarchy had made since Princess Diana's death. The Queen immediately withdrew Andrew from public life, a move that would have been unthinkable in earlier years. It showed that even the monarchy was learning that silence was no longer strength. Accountability, even within the royal circle, had become essential. Diana's death had taught them that the people demanded truth, and this time, the palace listened. For years, the royal family had operated on the idea that privacy was their armor. But in the new century, privacy began to look like secrecy. The younger royals, influenced by their mother's openness, started to use interviews, documentaries, and social media to show who they were. It was a quiet revolution. The image of the monarchy shifted from unreachable figures to relatable individuals. The lessons from 1997 were finally being understood. The Queen's Platinum Jubilee years later proved how far things had come. The crowds that once shouted in anger now cheered with affection. Yet deep beneath the celebrations, the memory of Diana remained like a ghost that could not be ignored. Her influence lived in the gestures, the words, and the smiles of her sons. Even Camilla's acceptance as queen consort is due to Diana's legacy. The idea that the monarchy had to bend to survive. Some royal observers say that it's not all rosy, though. They believe that the public's view of the royal family became more complex. They admired their service but questioned their privilege. They loved their history but wanted honesty. The line between royal and ordinary had blurred. In a way, Diana had built this bridge without even realizing it. Her warmth had reached across generations, reshaping what people expected from the throne. By the time Queen Elizabeth passed away, the royal family she left behind was very different from the one she had guided for 70 years. The silence that once defined them had been replaced by cautious openness. The cold distance had softened into a shared humanity. Yet, the cost of that change had been high. Diana's death had opened the door to empathy, but it had also left a wound that could never truly close. Prince Andrew's fall from grace stood as a reminder of what happens when the old ways return. Charles's rise to the throne marked another test. Could the lessons of the past hold firm in a new age? Could the family remain united under this rapid change? The answers were not clear. But one thing was, the monarchy had been forever changed by one woman's life and death. This one detail changed the entire story. Diana had wanted a world where the royals could show emotion without shame, where they could care openly without fear of criticism. And in a strange way, her passing had made that world possible. Her sons carried her vision forward even when they took different paths. The monarchy's story after 1997 was not about perfection, but about growth. Painful, slow, but real. Enduring legacies of Princess Diana. Time has passed, but Diana's spirit never really left. Even decades after her death, she remains one of the most loved figures in modern royal history. People still talk about her as if she were a friend they once knew. Her kindness, her laughter, and her courage to stand apart from royal tradition made her unforgettable. Every story told about her seems to carry the same feeling: warmth. To many, Diana was not just a princess. She was the woman who made royalty human. People remember her walking through hospitals without gloves, holding the hands of patients others were too afraid to touch. In the 1980s, when fear and misinformation about HIV were everywhere, she changed the world's view with one simple gesture. Sitting beside a man living with AIDS and holding his hand, that moment captured in photos became a turning point for compassion. It told the world that love was stronger than stigma. At first, it seemed normal until it wasn't. A royal visiting a hospital was nothing new. But the way Diana did it was different. She didn't stand at a distance or act superior. She knelt, listened, and made eye contact. Nurses often said that patients would light up when she entered a room. For her, these visits were not public duties. They were personal missions. She cared about people who felt invisible: the homeless, the sick, the poor, the forgotten. Her charity work went far beyond public appearances. She used her fame to draw attention to causes that others ignored. She worked closely with organizations helping victims of landmines, visiting Angola and Bosnia to walk through cleared minefields in a protective vest. Those images traveled across the world. The following year, the international treaty banning landmines gained historic support. Many credited Diana for making that possible. Her compassion had turned into real change, but what most people don't know about this is that Diana did much of her work quietly, away from cameras. She often visited hospitals and shelters at night, bringing small gifts or simply listening to people's stories. She wanted to be useful, not just admired. Friends later revealed that she used to make late-night phone calls to people struggling with illness or loss, offering comfort. For her, being a princess was not about power. It was about service. Her humanity reached beyond borders. In India, she visited Mother Teresa, sharing a moment of prayer and reflection. In Africa, she helped raise awareness about the struggles of children living with poverty and disease. And at home in the United Kingdom, she supported youth programs, children's hospitals, and cancer research centers. People saw in her something rare, a royal who made others feel seen. And that's when everything changed. The public's idea of what a royal should be was never the same again. For Diana, members of the royal family were admired from afar, like figures in a storybook. After Diana, they were expected to care, to connect, to show emotion. Her warmth had rewritten the unwritten rules of royalty. Even her sons carried that legacy forward. William and Harry both speak often about continuing her work, from supporting mental health awareness to fighting homelessness and helping children in need. But if you think that's all, wait till you hear this. Some of Diana's dresses have raised millions of pounds for charity auctions. Her letters, carefully written in her elegant handwriting, continue to inspire kindness and empathy. Even fashion houses and designers speak of her timeless influence. The idea that grace can come from simplicity and confidence from authenticity. Her legacy also lives in how people talk about kindness. Before Diana, words like vulnerability and emotion rarely had a place in royal life. Now they are part of how the public expects their leaders to behave. She showed that strength isn't about silence, it's about empathy. That lesson changed not only the monarchy, but also how the world sees public service. To this day, people leave flowers at Kensington Palace on her birthday. Her sons once said that her love was the greatest gift she gave them. And in a way, she gave that same gift to the world. Diana's light still shines in the causes she championed, the people she inspired, and the family she left behind. Her story reminds us that kindness, even when misunderstood, never fades. As time moves on and the monarchy continues to evolve, her presence remains like a heartbeat in the background of every royal story. What she started, this idea that a royal could also be real, became the foundation of everything that followed. The world still misses her, but it also carries her spirit forward. The Princess of Wales may be gone, but her compassion, courage, and humanity live on in the lives she changed forever. Thank you for staying with us. What triggered Prince Edward to come out about Princess Diana after so many years? Share your opinions with us in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also, click the following video on your screen and you will enjoy it. Enjoy it. Enjoy it. Enjoy it.